All right, so we're going to look at the memory process. We've already talked about this a little bit, or the parts of the brain, right? The hippocampus or the amygdala or the parietal lobe that are involved in memory. But we're going to take more of a dive into what memory looks like. I've got a couple of activities I'm going to include on the modules list for you to do. I've also got some cool videos that I'm going to include on our YouTube playlist. So you want to make sure that you're checking those things out. Want to start here with this picture from Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and this is the Jedi Temple Library. It was actually based off a library at a university in Ireland. And it is supposed to be a repository of all knowledge that is in the galaxy. Our brains are the repository of all the knowledge that we've learned over the course of our lifetimes. And so we want to look at memory and how that works. There are generally believed to be three different types of memory. It's called the ATKINSON-SHIFFRIN theory. I give a shout out to these two guys because they worked at my alma mater, Indiana University. 1968, they proposed the idea that there are three different pieces of memory. You have a sensory memory that is very short, very short-lived. It's just a memory of certain sensations that we have. You have short-term memories, just what they sound like, memories that are there for minutes, hours, maybe even days, but for the most part they'll end up going away. And then our long-term memories, which are the things that are stored more permanently. So let's look at these three different types. Basically what's going to happen is we've got a relationship between the three. A whole bunch of stuff is going to come into sensory memory. You are bombarded with thousands of sensations a minute for every moment that you're awake and conscious, and so all of that stuff's going to come in, and you're not going to remember the vast majority of it. It's only the stuff that we pay attention to. Note that word attention. Only the stuff that we pay attention to that can have the possibility of entering into short-term memory. And so short-term memory, let's say, for instance, you're talking to somebody, you're going back and forth, but then they tell you a phone number that you need to remember. Well, short-term memory is a point where maybe you repeat that number to yourself several different times with the idea that you want to make it stick, at least until you can grab your own phone and put the number in or something like that. That's what's going on with short-term memory. And the more we rehearse something, the better chance it's got of going into long-term memory. Now, when long-term memory is retrieved, it actually comes back into short-term memory temporarily, and there it can undergo changes. What we're going to look at next week in the article we're going to read together are some of these changes that can happen to memory, good and bad, when it comes back into short-term memory. Sensory memory is, like I said before, nearly instantaneous. It's happening all the time, but not a whole lot of this is going to stick. Usually something's got to be funny or scary, or it's got some type of pain involved or some type of pleasure for us to remember what it is that's going on. Most of the stuff that happens during the course of the day, we're not going to remember. I'll give you an example. If there is a drive you take every day, right? When school's in session, normally I take the same drive every day from my house. Very rarely do I remember something that happens on that drive. Most of the time, it's exactly the same drive. But let's say a deer runs out in front of my car. That is a memorable experience, right? That's something that's going to get my attention and is going to take it out of the realm of, oh, this happens every day. Two types of sensory memory to highlight. Echoic memory is remembering sounds, right? And we can do this for a few seconds. A lot of times if you're not really paying attention when somebody's talking, but they say something. Wait a minute, what'd you say? Now you've got to admit you weren't listening to them to get that, but there are still certain things that can poke up and grab our attention, even a couple of seconds after they're said. Iconic memory are the same type of memories, but with sight instead of sound. So you can go back and replay that in your head. It's one of the reasons if you ever, when you were a kid, played with sparklers and you spell out words in the air, it's one of the reasons that it looks like you're spelling out a word is because that iconic memory has a memory of where that light was before. So next time you're playing on the 4th of July with that, and you really want to play with the sparklers, but they don't want you to. You say, "Hey, you're doing a psychology experiment." That's where that's why you're playing. Second type of memory is what's called short-term memory. Short-term memory is just that. It's not going to last forever, but it's something that needs to be remembered long enough for you to use the information or write it down or something like that. Our short-term memory is limited, but there are things we can do to stretch those limits. There was a psychologist named George Miller that proposed his theory of what he called the magic number 7. And he said for whatever reason, the human mind is able to remember things in sevens better than it is other sets of information. So you can remember 7 things better than you can 5 or 8 or 9. And so he did some experiments looking at that. Now, that's not just 7 individual pieces of information. What you see with a lot of memory masters, and I'm going to put a TED Talk from a memory master up on the playlist for you, is the idea of chunking. Basically, what they do is they come up with tricks to remember big chunks of information. And so if you can put it into 7 chunks, then you have exponentially increased the amount of things that you can remember. Rehearsal is the key to this whole process. The problem can come when we try to rehearse something that we don't really have any real connection to. And that can be part of the problem if you go and try to cram a whole bunch of information into your head before you take a test. If there's nothing interesting for you there, or if there's nothing for you to connect that to, it's a lot harder to hold that into your memory. That's why people that cram, you really feel like you're getting something done, but the problem becomes what happens when you sit down and take that test, right? Your mind goes completely blank, and it's because there's no connection that's going to help those memories to stick around. The second type, or the third type of memory is what's called long-term memory. I've got a picture here for you of the movie Inside Out. And Inside Out does an excellent job of showing how memory works. Those guys from Pixar actually went and worked with psychologists. I've got a couple of articles there linked on the Canvas page dealing with memory that you might be interested in. But they really looked to see what was going on with memory. When you look at this, you can see each memory is represented as a colored ball. And the yellow ones in the movie are joy, the red ones are tinged with anger, so on and so forth. We've really got 2 types of long-term memories. One is what they call explicit memory. So that is the who, what, why, and when. That can be of our life, which means birthday parties or interactions that we have with people, or kind of day-to-day stuff that make up the episodes of our life. There's also what is called semantic memory. And semantic memory is just facts that basically everybody knows, like George Washington was the first president, or the capital of the state is Indianapolis. Those are semantic memories. Nothing we have really a personal connection to. Now, that doesn't mean you can't remember the time that you visited Indianapolis, and then you're making those connections too. But semantic memory is very much just kind of everybody knows this type of stuff. Implicit memory is the how. And the how part of memory is how we do certain things. And so this could be cerebellum related, right, with muscle memory and the things that are there. But the idea of how we're going to do things step by step is then in our implicit memory. Classical conditioning is in here as well. We're going to talk about behaviorism in a couple of weeks. But classical conditioning is remembering the consequences of a particular action. So did it work out well for you? Did it not work out well for you? And that can determine whether or not we do that same type of thing again. One of the most famous patients in psychological history is this guy. He's known only by his initials, HM. And HM had a condition for which he had brain surgery, and they took out part of his brain. I've got a video I'll put up on the playlist for you, and it left him without the ability to create new memories. And so from that day forward, he couldn't create new memories. He could only hold on to information for an extremely limited amount of time, and then it went away. It's kind of the basis, if you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates, of that type of movie, where he just didn't understand kind of what was happening, or couldn't remember what was happening past the point in time where he had that surgery. There are two things that help us with creating memories. One is the idea of a schema, and a schema is just an idea of what something is. If I show you all these pictures that are on the screen, you know that all of them are chairs. That's because we have a general idea in our head about what a chair is supposed to look like. Even though all these chairs look very different, we don't misinterpret and say, well, that's a table or something like that. We just have an idea in our head about what a chair is supposed to be. Same thing can happen in situations. We have scripts of how we think things should go, and as long as things are going by the script, we really don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. It's only when something happens outside of the ordinary, like I mentioned with that drive-in to school. If you saw an animal on the side of the road, or if there was an accident on the way to where you were driving, it's something that goes against that script. And basically, this is just your brain being lazy. Schemas and scripts are ways for our brains to take a little bit of a break and not have to work so hard. We just look and say, well, we've got, we know what's supposed to happen, and really the only time we remember something is when something gets kind of out of the ordinary. When it causes us to pay attention. Three types of memories that we're going to see. One is a flashbulb memory. This is associated with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. These are memories that are kind of instantaneously seared into our memories. We remember a lot of senses, a lot of the sensory information here that's going to connect with those memories. And we'll see that in some of the things that we take a look at. Repressed memories are memories that are from younger days that we push backwards into our minds and try not to remember. And all of this leads up to this idea of eyewitness testimony. Can we trust what we're seeing and what we're experiencing? And so the article that we're going to look at by Dr. Loftus is going to call that into question. I've got a TED Talk that you're going to take a look at that is dealing with her as well, just to give you an idea of, can we trust our memory as much as we think we can trust our memory.